Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you doing today? I hope everything is good for you. I hope that your life is wonderful and glorious and magical today. There's some interesting noises going on outside. I hope that it's not coming through. It sounds, I don't know what's going on. It sounds like there's a tank. I'm pretty sure there's no battles being fought in my neighborhood, so it's probably a bulldozer of some kind. I didn't think there was construction going on right now, but we have broken ground on the final house in this development. I moved into this development in 2012. I was the first one here. I lived here for 10 months before we had anybody else living here. So almost a full year. 2013 was when I got my first neighbor. And they were supposed to build 19 houses, and they're just now finishing. They were hoping that people would buy a plot and hire their own contractors, but as it turned out, I think only one house was built that way. So 18 of these houses have been built by not the developer. The developer is in there is a developer, but it's also split between that developer and the housing authority in this area. So the county housing authority. And the builders from the county are the ones who have built these 18 houses. They've actually built 19 in this area in the past 7 years. That's pretty amazing. I've always wondered what it would be like to be a carpenter. This is not what I intended to talk about, but let's talk about it. Growing up, I've told you yesterday, I've told you many times in the past, my father taught auto mechanics. He spent 32 years as a teacher at a vocational institution. It was a high school vocational teacher, shop teacher, auto mechanics teacher. But he put himself through college as a carpenter. He worked summers for his friend's father, who owned a contracting business, and they built houses, and I think he did work in some industrial, or not industrial, but commercial spaces as well. Did a lot of renovations and add-ons and that sort of stuff. So my dad and his father, my grandfather, who I never met, my grandfather died. I think my father was 25 or something when my grandfather died. My grandfather was just the kind of classic handyman. He sold automotive parts for a living. So he traveled around. He was a traveling salesman, sold auto parts. But he had, a workbench and a little pegboard with some generic tools. And he was very frugal. So if there was something that needed to be done, he did it. It was kind of like the father from A Christmas Story. I imagine that's what my grandfather was like, kind of that man who refused to let somebody else do the work because he could do it, right? I don't know if that's based in any reality or not, but my father was that man. My father literally could do it all, except for electrical. He didn't like messing with electrical. I don't know why. It's not difficult at all, but he could do all the other things. So as a child, at a very young age, there's pictures of me in diapers when he was building his garage. My parents bought a ranch house in the 40s, or not the 40s. They weren't, boy, god dang. They weren't even alive. I mean, they were, but anyway. In the 70s, I think, or 60s, they bought a ranch-style house that had a carport. My father eventually boxed that carport and added 2 garage doors so you could drive through the carport. And then later on added it was a 2-stall garage, but it was a very long 2-stall garage on the back of that. So you could drive through the first little stall from the lean-to carport, drive through that to get to the larger garage in the back. And they built that when I was a kid. And then my father and I built a deck when I was probably between 8 and 10. I was young, but I was old enough to help, legitimately help. We built a deck on the back of his house. And when I was old enough to do real manual labor, in my teens, we started the roof of the house. My parents' house had no overhangs, so the roof, there was just a drip edge on the roof, and it caused a lot of weather. It could, blow against the house. So he wanted to add overhangs. Overhang, and then where he did the additional garage, those roofs never really met quite right. The main roof of the house was here, the carport roof was down here, and then the new garage roof right into. So he wanted to kind of tie all that together. So we decided over a couple of summers we could do that. One summer we ripped off half of the main house's roof and put in a proper 18-inch or 2-foot overhang, restructured all of that, and then roofed that portion. And then the following summer we went and ripped off the rest of the house, the rest of the roof on the house, re-roofed it, and built a new, brought the original the house roof out over what was the carport, and then brought it in the back, brought it all together into one big roof, and then roofed it all. And so I spent those 2 summers doing that, and then the following summer we did my grandfather's house, and my grandfather's house was built by his grandfather, in the 1800s, handmade, all that sort of stuff, and it had, the roofs were uneven, not level, they big sags in them. There was I believe 13 layers of shingles that we had to scrape off, and tar paper. It wasn't all shingles, it was whatever they could afford to patch the roof, and we resheathed it and roofed it and built a new extension off the back. And I spent a good 3 or 4 summers of my life doing hard construction work, but I loved it. And when I was a mechanic, I loved being a mechanic. I loved being able to fix things and to have that tangible result at the end that's I did this and now it works. I fixed this person's problem with my hands. It was very satisfying. Manual labor is very satisfying that way. But as a mechanic, there's very little direction. You're just kind of here's a job, go do it, and you just go do it and you figure it out. Whereas I think with carpentry, there's a lot of expectation that you do it by the book, and very clearly laid plans. And I think I could enjoy that kind of work if I wasn't so old, and not old, but if I wasn't so set on being a software developer. I think that carpentry would always interest me. It'd be fun to build something like that and say, I built that. That's people living in that house are living in a structure that I built. And I know that basically there's been about 2 or 3 of the guys who have built these houses that have built all of these houses. There's been a few other people rotate. They constantly have overturned workers, but the main core 2 or 3 guys have built all of these. And I know that they look at this development with pride. It's a good feeling. I like making stuff, making these drawers and stuff, making a desk, I like looking at that stuff and going, I made that. And oftentimes, the one wonderful thing about it is I talked to you yesterday about how I'm doing this and how I did these drawers and how they're not perfect. When I built that desk, it's not perfect. But when I look at it now, it's more I made that. Wow, I didn't know I could do stuff like that. That's a good feeling too. Yeah. I need to spend more time doing manual labor. Gotta find an excuse. I think that's what that all came down to. So, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and being amazing friends, being wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you tomorrow. Alexa, tell me a random fact.
When hermit crabs grow out of the empty shells they live in, they move into bigger ones. Smaller crabs line up behind them in size order to swap into the bigger shells left by the crab ahead in the queue.
like moving day? That's pretty sweet.